Hello again. Hope you're enjoying today's talks as much as I am. I'm back again to this time talk about MiRo. Now, if you visited Beach Lab previously, then it's quite likely that you will have come across MiRo in previous years, and you'll know just what MiRo particularly likes from people that come to visit, and that is stroking. MiRo is possibly the most emotional, demanding robot that I've ever actually worked with. And that one of the reasons for that is that MiRo is a biomimetic robot. And what that means is essentially that they've tried to model animals, model animal behaviour, model the way that the animals actually think in a robotic platform as much as possible to reproduce many of the behaviours that we see in pets. Specifically, sort of your pets like dogs, cats, rabbits, that like to be stroked, they like the attention, and they also get scared quite easily. And MiRo particularly gets scared when there's ever anything noisy. And if you recall, Beach Lab can get pretty noisy. So the only way to keep MiRo calm during those days is literally to stroke him all day long. And he loves to be stroked. So a very friendly robot. But this year, as we're not actually able to be there in person, I thought I might actually try and show you some of the different sides of MiRo, introduce some of the different features that perhaps aren't always easy to show in such a noisy environment when all he wants to be done, all he wants is stroking all day long. So before I go into those, I thought I'd introduce MiRo, show some clips of MiRo in a more natural setting, and then go through some of the different features of the robot. The very first thing you'll notice about MiRo is these lovely big ears. As the wolf says, big ears all the best for hearing with, and literally these are ears. They're able to rotate. If I get this, hopefully this will work. There we go, we can actually see it. Yep, yes, MiRo. It can actually rotate the ears independently, and it's able to use that to be able to track sounds down quite reliably. We'll also see we've got two quite large eyes, and while the eyes themselves can't actually move, it does have eyelids that you can blink with, and you'll notice it's sort of slightly spaced out. So it gets like a rabbit that actually sees slightly outwards to be able to get a wider view around him. In the nose, I lift up the nose slightly, you might be able to see a couple of sensors hidden in there, and they're ultrasound sensors which can be used to detect distance to objects. And I shall show you that working. Moving on to the back, we have a lovely tail at the back, and if I can wag the tail slightly, we can actually see that moving. And when MiRo's happy, the tail most definitely wags. And you might be able to see the lights there gradually changing, indicating the mood. And MiRo is currently neutral. It's not too happy, not too sad, but willing to be played with a little bit. So what I'd like to quickly do is show you some videos about MiRo. Now, what I'm going to take the opportunity to do now is actually show you some of the side of MiRo that you wouldn't normally get to see, and that's actually reading the sensors and looking at some of the behaviours in a bit more detail. So what we can see here is the sensor readings from MiRo. So we can see the two cameras looking at the camera at the moment. You can see the images from both eyes, and as I say, they're slightly offset, so there's not a huge amount of overlap. We can also see the touch sensors, and as I stroke MiRo, we can see those changing. Or as I stroke the head, we can start to see the head sensors changing as well. A little bit there. It likes to be scratched behind the ear, slightly. We have light sensors around the base of the robot that are able to detect how light or dark it is, and we can use a sonar to see how far away an obstacle is at any point in time. The cliff sensors will hopefully help it stop it from falling off the table, but at the moment it's quite nice and secure on the table. And then there's various other sensors that we can see that tell us a bit more about what's going on inside the robot, what the robot is currently sensing in terms of motion. We have the ability to manually drive the robot around. That was what I was just using a moment ago to be able to control the robot. So we also have the ability to see the microphones, and as I click, we should be able to see MiRo moving towards those sounds. There we go. So what I'm going to show you next is to do with the motion side of the robot, which is where MiRo starts to get particularly sensitive about things. So at the moment, we can see the state of the robot. And what mood it's currently actually in. Now let's put it into a neutral mode just to stabilize things. And you can see the emotional state is being reset to neutral, completely neutral. Now in this state, what we might be able to see is the lights are generally white, slight yellow. Not too happy at the moment because I'm picking him up. But it's relatively gradual changing, and especially as we change to relax, it's even more slow and gradual it's changing. When it's changed to neutral aroused, then we can see it's a bit more proactive in terms of the movement that it's making. The lights are flashing a bit faster. Or you can change it to other modes as well. So I'm going to set it to unhappy neutral, and what we see straight away is that the lights change to red. So we've got red lights showing the unhappy state, but they're sort of not too proactive. In relaxed mode, it's much more gradual change. There's no sudden movement, but it's definitely not particularly happy at the moment. If, however, we change it to the unhappy aroused, then we get quite a sudden change in behaviour. The flashing is much faster, the vocalisation changes slightly, a bit more urgent if you like, and the movement is normally a bit more erratic than this, but I think at the moment he's perhaps getting a bit tired. It's been a long day for him. So if we change to happy relaxed, then there's an obvious change in behaviour. We go to green lights, much happier, and generally relaxed movements, normally relaxed movements. At the other extreme, if we change to happy aroused, then it's actually quite interested, it's wanting to play with us, and showing more interest in what's going on around it. Normally. But robots never behave for live demos. So I'm going to change back to neutral there for the moment. Now, there's one last trick that MiRo doesn't normally tell anybody about. Stop that. MiRo's got a secret ability. He very rarely tells anybody about his secret ability. But just for you today, he's going to show it off. So, are you going to show me your secret ability, MiRo? Take it away.
Yarr! Ahoy, matey! Yarr, walk the plank! Yarr! 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 Yeah! Yarr! Yarr! Shiver me timbers! Ahoy, matey! Yarr! Yarr! Shiver me timbers!
Who would have thought that MiRo was secretly a pirate? Thank you, MiRo. So there's MiRo. So the question is, what is a robot like MiRo really useful for? And what are we doing with MiRo? Generally, MiRo is designed as a pet, a social companion, a robot to keep you company at home during the day. You can see it's a friend, it's a social creature, it has emotions, it wants attention, possibly too much attention at times, but it's there as a friend, a companion robot. It's also been developed more recently as an educational robot, so they're making functionality available to be able to program the robot a lot more. So you might actually start to see MiRo appearing in some schools across the country as they expand the program further. One of the things that we've been quite keen to investigate with MiRo is whether MiRo could actually provide more than just a companion in the home, but actually provide some service as well. So especially for elderly, those living alone, those that are perhaps a bit more vulnerable, whether MiRo could actually provide a alarm system if something goes wrong, or if the person needs a bit of a help. Now, clearly, MiRo doesn't have any arms, doesn't have the ability to speak and avoid, sort of explain issues particularly clearly, but could potentially detect if somebody has fallen over. Could potentially detect if somebody's had an accident, if they've fallen over, and raise an alarm. It's internet enabled, so it could potentially send out a message to some preferred contacts in order to say, my companion has fallen over, had an accident. But it could also actually help if perhaps you're having a bad day. So let's say you've not got up at the normal time, you're struggling to get going, then MiRo could actually be able to come in, say, recognise the fact that you're breaking from your normal routine, and potentially encourage you to follow some kind of activity and routine. So we've been looking at sort of games that people could play with a robot such as this. The most obvious ones are sort of fetch games or follow games. We've also looked at some action games where MiRo perhaps calls out in its own voice a particular shape. You have to either produce a shape or show the shape. But you can also use the cameras to recognise body poses, so could encourage exercises, for example. So there is potential for, as a companion around the house, to not just be there to keep you company, but could actually serve a purpose there as well. The other option that we've been exploring for MiRo is as an educational robot for those with perhaps learning difficulties. Now, as a robot modelled on an animal, it shares various similarities, properties with animals. And for those perhaps on more on the autistic spectrum who struggle to understand the emotions displayed by animals, then MiRo could actually provide a platform for learning how to interact safely with an animal. If you poke an animal in the wrong way, if you don't take care of it, then it makes it unhappy. And sometimes that's not always very clear from the animal's behaviour. But when the lights on MiRo change colour, then that's something that's very easy to identify, very easy to pick up, and can be used to say that's a behaviour that isn't very enjoyable at the moment, it's making me unhappy. Whereas more of a stroking type behaviour obviously makes MiRo very happy, but is quite clearly visible in the change in behaviour from MiRo and the change in the colour of lights. And that's certainly an area where children, perhaps on the autistic spectrum, who struggle to read those emotions from animals, can very quickly see the change in behaviour on MiRo. And then you can start to try and transfer that behaviour from the robot to the real animals. So those are various applications that a robot such as this could be used for. Or we could just actually sit here and relax and stroke the robot all day, which can in itself be quite a therapeutic activity when you get stressed. So I hope you found that informative and interesting. And I hope you enjoy the rest of the day.